Live from Detroit, Michigan, this is the Honestly Sis podcast newsletter edition. Hey. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Wherever this podcast may find you, I hope that it finds you in great spirit. Hi, friend. Welcome back to the episode. Welcome if you are new here. If you are new here, please make sure that you subscribe to the podcast. Go ahead and leave us a review, 5 stars only. It helps other people find the information. Another way to support the podcast is joining our mailing list over at the Honest Society. The Honest Society is a safe and empowering space for anyone to become the best version of themselves. Here, we believe that honesty is more than words. It is a way of life. My name is Honest Am. I am the captain here of this society, and I am the writer of the Honestly Sis newsletter, which is a safe space to tell honest stories about life, love, and spirituality. And this week, we are going to actually have a topic that is going to be a doozy. I'm actually going to do our first ever trigger warning. Trigger warning. So the themes of this week episode is going to shed some light on some of our shadow places this is where we talk about the shadow work. This is the shadow side that some of us may deal with. It's something that I definitely struggled with very early on in my life, and actually doing this letter, getting ready for this episode, allowed me to see that I actually healed it. And so this may be a little triggering because we're going to explore themes of codependency, enmeshment, and love addiction. I will be giving you signs and examples of how codependency can show up in not only your love relationships, but in work. I think one thing that we forget about the healing journey is that while it is great to heal and to overcome things and to do that shadow work, sometimes the first stage of that is shock. It can be anger when you find out new information about yourself, but it's also great once you can push past those emotions and actually start to incorporate the information that you learn. And so I just want to put that out there that as you may be reading my story, you may start identifying and start recognizing themes within yourself. And when we start doing that deep dive, I want you to just be gentle with yourself. I want you to know that codependency is not a clinical definition. It is not a personality disorder. It is simply a learned behavior that we typically get from our childhood and is passed on from generation or generation. And since it's a learned behavior, then that means that we can unlearn it and we can become a better version of ourselves. And that's actually what I learned about myself today. Just this week of preparing for this episode. So I want you to just be kind with yourself. And if you are identifying or if you do see the signs that you are in a codependent relationship, then stay tuned because I am definitely going to give you some tips, some tricks, and some real life advice on how I was able to get out of it. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get into this week's letter. This week episode is all about realizing your worth and what happens when love doesn't fill the hole inside. If you are on the newsletter mailing list, you have already probably heard this letter and you probably know it already. But if you aren't, this would be a great time to go jump on over to our archive at www.honestlysis.com. I will make sure to link that in the show notes so that you can read this newsletter in its entirety. But I'm not going to waste any more time because I actually have a lot to get to today. And so we're just going to go ahead and get right into it. Our quote for this week comes from the wonderful Rhapsody, and it goes as follows. Trying to follow my own advice. Too many of my friends approaching 30 upset that they ain't nobody's wife. I hope you enjoy. Sis, do you watch Black Love series? If not, after you read this, track it down. It's a must see. Can we just stop and take a moment and praise Oprah? On is on the roll. This series was a breath of fresh air. It was beautiful to see men speak openly about falling in love and about their shortcomings in love, too. Like everyone, I went on social media after the show aired, and the responses were disheartening. Status after status read, "I'll never find that type of love," as though this was a fantasy show and not a documentary. I couldn't help but feel like most people missed the point, which is that no matter your financial status or upbringing, love takes time, patience, and hard work. For a long time, I didn't understand that. I went into relationships looking for someone to complete me, thinking if I just found the one, I'll be happy and everything will magically be okay. What I didn't realize was that with every breakup, I was giving away my power. Each time I broke up, a piece of me was chipped away. Each one chipped away at me until I finally said enough. For a few years in college, I went through what weak women love to call a hoe phase. At the time, I was really running from heartbreak, but looking back, I can see how that phase forced me to get serious about what I wanted in a partner. It taught me to separate great sex from genuine feelings. It showed me how the less I wanted a relationship, the more a man seemed to want one. And then one summer night in August, I met a guy who had everything on my list. He was fine, talented, and driven. I forgot all logic and threw everything out the window. I just knew he was the one, and that was my mistake. He may have checked all the boxes, but that didn't mean he was ready for commitment. His focus was on his dreams, and I thought I could change that. I didn't realize then that relationships aren't just about love, they're about timing, alignment, and growth. I believe love was enough. I didn't factor in his path or mine. To make a long story short, I was ready for marriage. He wasn't. And yet we still grew close, almost in spite of that truth. We developed a friendship disguised as a relationship. He challenged me in ways I didn't expect, asking me over and over, "Is this what you really want?" I was terrified to lose him. So terrified I couldn't imagine surviving him. But eventually I had to face the reality. I couldn't keep living in a fantasy. Deep down, I knew this relationship wouldn't last, and I started to whisper to myself, I must survive this. That was the beginning of my healing. Trying to survive him led me straight back to myself. I finally saw that I had love all wrong. Finding him didn't fill the hole in my heart, only falling in love with myself did. I had spent so much energy believing that having a man was a prize, when the truth was, I was the prize. Looking back, I believe God gave me a break. He saw my good intentions, but he knew I had to get the me part right first. I had to learn that no one else could make me whole. That was my work. And once I started doing that work, everything shifted. I stopped obsessing over the list, the packaging, the timing. I stopped measuring my worth about whether I had a man beside me. Instead, I started building a life where I already felt safe, loved, and enough. Now, when I think about love, I see it differently. Real love is not about having someone save you. It's about two whole people choosing each other and still doing the work every day. What I know for sure is that the best gift I can bring my future partner is the wholeness I fought for within myself. All right, so that is our letter. When I started my healing journey, I followed Miriam Hessena. She has a New Earth Mystery School, and in that, that's where I first heard the term codependency and enmeshment. But it wasn't until I did my inner child therapy that I realized how that codependency and enmeshment was affecting my life. And even then, because I had so much information from my inner child therapy that I didn't really do a deep dive on codependency until I actually did this episode and I learned like I'm low key a textbook definition of a codependent. Like, come from a toxic family background, learned it from generations on. But as always, when I have these type of topics, I like to do a deep dive. I like to actually get information that is outside of myself. And so if anything I say here, you don't believe me, you can go in the show notes because that's where I got all my information from psychology websites, and all of that good stuff. So let's get into it. The first thing that we need to know is that, as I mentioned at the top of the episode, codependency is not a clinical diagnosis or it's a personality disorder. It first appeared in our zeitgeist around the 1980s and substance abuse cycles to describe lopsided relationships. Typically, a lot of the work of codependency is around people who are dealing with loved ones who have substance abuse issues, and it really talk about you can sometimes how you can enable that person because of your codependent relationship, enable them to keep doing the abuse, thinking that you're doing it out of love, but really you're enabling that behavior. The main signs of codependency is constantly elevating the needs of others above your own. This may manifest as self-sacrifice, seeking approval from others, or accepting blame to avoid conflict. Codependency refers to any enmeshed relationship in which one person loses their sense of independence. I'm going to say that again. Codependency refers to any enmeshed relationship in which one person loses their sense of independence and believe they need to tend to someone else to have a self-importance. In 2018, they did a research study that found that codependency falls in four main categories. That is self-sacrifice, a tendency to focus on others, a need for control, which fuels conflict, as well as difficulty recognizing and expressing your own emotions. The definition for enmeshment is family relationships that lack boundaries, such as those in which rules and expectations are confused. And so you may think about the oldest child. We talk all the time about the first daughter, her taking the role of a parent versus being a child that could be in a messed relationship. And I do want to say that I think that codependency and enmeshment is very common in Black families just due to what we had to overcome in slavery. And so I think because we did not always have the choice to keep our family together, we have found ways to keep our family together in non-healthy ways. And so again, as I start getting into some of the signs of codependence, I want you to recognize that again, this is a learned behavior. It's not like saying that you're going to be like this forever. If you learn the behavior, you can unlearn it just as easily. And so they say codependency behaviors are for the most part rooted in childhood relationships with your parents and others. And so if you grew up in a dysfunctional household, one where you couldn't always depend on your family to be there, or for your caregiver to take care of your needs, and then that may make you have an anxious attachment style, or make you feel like you need to have that partner within your grasp, that could just be codependency again. And I just really want to state that this is not just something that affects our love relationships. This is something that can pop up in our work. It can pop up in our friendships. It can really show itself in a multitude of ways. I'm going to read just a couple of things. As I mentioned before, codependency is considered a mental health-ish condition, and experts have yet to outline a diagnosis, a criteria for it. But here are some of the common signs of codependency: a deep-seated need for approval from others, a habit of taking on more work than you realistically can handle, both to earn praise or to lighten the load of a loved one. So, again, maybe at work, you're taking on more work even though you really don't have the capacity, but you're doing it anyway because either you want to be seen as a good person, or you may feel like your manager may give you extra points for it. A pattern of avoiding conflict, a tendency to apologize or take blame in order to keep the peace, a tendency to minimize or ignore your own desires. I think that's a really big one. A mood that reflects how others feel rather than your own emotions. Excessive concerns about a loved one's habits or behaviors. Guilt, guilt or anxiety when doing something for yourself. Doing things you really don't want to do simply to make others happy. Having trouble making decisions, where to live, where to pursue a career, when to spend time with your friends because you worry your choices may affect your partner. Another ways that this show up in our family relationships is being on call for everyone 24/7, completing your child's homework, giving your siblings money that you need for rent, dropping everything for a hostile or aging parent. Another way that this can show up in your work relationships is saying yes to every assignment from your boss, doing favors for your coworkers even though you're slammed, regularly picking up the slack on group projects. In your romantic relationships, it can show up like cutting off friends who don't get your boyfriend or girlfriend, changing your schedule around your partner's needs, habitually skimming out on sleep to wait up for your partner, making excuses for your spouse's angry outbursts while drinking, and having the constant need to be seen as the hero or savior by your partner. I think some of the big things that stand out for me is when you put other people needs above your own. I know that's something that I have been working on a lot, but for like maybe a couple of years ago, God was really working with me about being honest about the things that I desire and not just being honest about them, but actually doing it. Like, if you find yourself being the type of person who say, "Ooh, I wanna go to this concert," or "I wanna go out of town," or "I wanna go see this thing," but you never actually go and do it, you have to ask yourself why. Is it because you're waiting on someone else to do it? Or is it because you genuinely don't feel like you have the ability to fulfill your own desires? The last thing that I would say is in a codependent relationship, there tends to be a severe imbalance of power. Often one person may be giving much more time, energy, and focus than the other person who consciously or unconsciously takes advantage of the situation in order to maximize the needs. This was like another way to identify signs that you're in a codependent relationship. Here are 10 signs that you are in a codependent relationship. One, you want to change who they are. I remember meeting my boyfriend and feeling like he was perfect, but he said he didn't want to have he didn't believe in love or that he didn't want a love relationship, and I convinced myself that I can change him. Something that fundamental, you cannot change anybody's mind, and I spent 7 years dragging myself down trying. Two, it's difficult to explain how you're feeling about your relationship. Three, you feel anxious when you don't hear from them. Four, you feel like you need to save them from themselves. That's how I feel. I'm going to show him that he needs love and then everything will be great. Five, you have trouble being alone. Ooh, that was a big one. I think I talked about that in the article. Six, you routinely cancel plans to spend time with your partner. That's a big one. Your space doesn't feel like yours. You feel like maybe you asked for too much. Their behavior escalates when you try to set healthy boundaries. And last but not least, taking time out for yourself feels selfish. If you are experiencing any of those things, you may be in a codependent relationship. But the good thing is that there are ways to recover from it. So let's get into the recovery part of it because as we don't want to just talk about it now that we have identified it, now that we know that that may be something that is personally going on in our life. Let's talk about ways that we can really overcome it. And recovery is all about feeling secure in yourself. It's about taking time to accept all parts of yourself, the good, the bad, the ugly, the indifference, the annoying part. You have to fall in love with you. You have to put yourself first. Learning to identify and explore your desires and needs. And so, again, just getting into that simple practice of following through on your desires is taking steps away from being codependent. Resolving from a we perspective instead of always putting the needs of others, the needs and wishes of others above your own. I think that is so important. Especially as women, I feel like we've been conditioned to put the needs of others above our own. But I just feel like if you're young and you're single and you don't have any kids, you should not be putting your boyfriend needs above your own. This is you only get one life to live and you really have to spend it, loving on yourself and really taking care of yourself. It says, this is something that I loved. It says, ideally, relationships work best when the needs of all parties are met in a balanced way. In a relationship, you should be able to retain your own sense of identity from the other person. And so if you find yourself in a partnership and this person is telling you, I don't you shouldn't be so ambitious, like, that's a red flag. That person is trying to change you, and if that person is trying to change you, then you need to move away from that. Especially if you are not in a place where you're strong enough to stand up for that. You just really have to be mindful of that. If I look back on my past relationships, literally every man that I was with, except for like maybe my last two exes, were trying to change me. Like, I can really say that my ex, I think because he was so focused on himself and his dreams and his goals that it kind of forced me to focus on my own dreams and goals. And then the partner before that, no, he definitely, yeah, he didn't want me to be ambitious. Again, it's just like you have to be mindful. When I hear that, um I'm thinking about Harlem and how Angie met that guy, and he was like, "I didn't realize you were that ambitious." Like, red flag. When somebody can't accept you or who you're trying to be, or they're trying to change you or mold you into their version of you, then that's a red flag and you need to get out of that relationship. If you feel like you may be experiencing this, you should talk to a mental health professional, because they can really help you out a lot. Ways that a mental health professional can offer support is one, recognizing the key signs of codependency. They can, two, help you overcome people pleasing tendencies. Three, they can help you address related mental health symptoms, including feelings of guilt, anxiety, or depression. Those feelings of guilt, anxiety, and depression, because a lot of the codependency is rooted from our childhood, which come from being in a mesh family, please make sure you go look at the literature on that. But that constant feeling of feeling guilty and feeling anxious because you are trying to please yourself, that comes from your childhood. And so working on that will allow you to feel more confident and more secure in yourself within a relationship. I think the beautiful thing is that just because you recognize that you have codependent ways, it's a learned behavior. So it's when you can unlearn it. And I'm so grateful that after doing all this research, I realized that I did unlearn it, and I basically unlearned it by just connecting back to myself. And so the last two things that the mental health professional can offer support is by helping you reconnect with your sense of self and by setting healthy boundaries. There is a quote, here it is. There is a quote that really kind of gut punched me, and I hope that you get it after this. It says, "A life lived for someone else does not do much to fulfill you. You'll always find it much easier to offer support when you prioritize your own life." And so if you find yourself just constantly waiting for somebody else to get that approval or validation on your life, or that you feel like other people's needs are way more important than yours, then I really, really, really hope that you take this episode to heart and you do some hard work on how to overcome it. If you are still unsure about codependency and how to identify it, there's a movie on HBO Max called I Love You Forever. Go watch that movie. That movie, first of all, just helps you identify a lot of red flags in relationships, to help you see people who are love bombing, people who are codependent, people who may be a little narcissistic. So go check that show out, just so that you can help yourself identify it a little bit better. Some more movies and TV shows that will help you with this is A Star Is Born, which is crazy because I saw A Star Is Born one time in a movie theater and I have never seen it again. That movie fucked me up so bad. But now that I can identify that it was showing a codependent relationship, I can see why I have not watched that movie again, and I am going to watch it one more time. But A Star Is Born shows a destructive codependent relationship between two superstars. It highlights the theme of enabling behavior and self-destruction. The Twilight series, which, when she was losing it with Edward, she couldn't eat, she couldn't sleep, she couldn't do anything. And that's another thing I want to highlight is that in pop culture, we can normalize and romanticize codependency. Matter of fact, like, I didn't even that's why I didn't realize that what I was doing was codependent is because I saw it not only on TV, but I saw it in my, in my parents' relationship. So I thought it was normal, but it's not. And so in the Twilight series, it features deeply codependent relationship between the main characters, with the drama often sensationalizing these unhealing dynamics. So, Bella just not being able to operate when Edwardson is not around. When Edward thought Bella was dead, he was gonna kill himself off. Romeo and Juliet is actually another example of a codependent relationship. The Notebook, which again is like these very romantic things that we've been taught to think is sweet, but it's not. The volatile relationship between the main characters is described as some as manifestation of intense codependency, even a form of addiction. This man couldn't even leave his wife. He decided to just spend his whole life retelling the story of how they fell in love. Like, romantic, maybe. Codependent, hell yes. Okay. Last two, the Blue Valentine explores the unraveling of a relationship marked by intense codependency and emotional instability. And then you features the character of 40, who was enabling his sister, and highlights the dynamic of a codependent relationship. So even though I kind of think he also was being very codependent, but he actually was more obsessive and he wanted to kill himself. But the relationship between 40 and Love is another example of codependency, but codependent within a sibling dynamic. So again, I just want you to understand these are some movies that you can check out to help you understand that concept of codependency just a little bit more, and know that it's not just a concept that appears within your love life, but it can also appear within your family relationships. It can appear on your job, anywhere else that you have relationships with people. All right. So, the conclusion of this episode is that wholeness comes from within. Boundaries, self-trust, and self-love, that is the foundation for healthy love. Real love is two people choosing each other, not someone coming to save you. Y'all, this episode, first of all, I'm so grateful that I was able to do this deep dive. When I was reading the letter, this was the first letter that I was like, it showed me how consistent my patterns of relationships was, because as I was reading the letter, I thought that I was talking about an ex, and I was actually talking about my boyfriend at the time. And it also showed me that I was being codependent, and I didn't even realize that I was being codependent. But I also wanted to talk just a little bit about the theme of love addiction, and showing that it's not it's two different things. I thought for a long time that I had a love addiction, and they describe a love addiction as you looking for a partnership to give you purpose. I never looked at a relationship from that point of view, but I did look at it from the point of view of me wanting to be saved, or me trying to save and help that person. And so that's where that codependency come from. And from my research, I saw that it says codependency doesn't necessarily turn into love addiction, but codependency is the place where love addiction stems from. Okay. And so when I had first broke up with my boyfriend, I was serious about us breaking up. I actually had looked up love addiction classes, and I really started doing some research around love addiction, because I thought maybe that's what I had, because I was at this point where I did feel like I had to be in a relationship. Like, I had to be in a relationship in order to feel 100% whole. Um and so, like, when I started looking at it and I started doing some of the research, I just realized how intense love addiction was. And so I was like, okay, maybe I don't have a love addiction. And so then I just started to challenge myself with, okay, so how can I just be comfortable being single? I've been in therapy now for, I think, maybe 10 years, 10 plus years now. But I continue to go to therapy. But what really, really helped me is that I started going on like solo vacations. I started to, you know, have ideas or have plans that I wanted to do. So say for example, I wanted to see Beyonce. I didn't have like quote close friends at the time to go see Beyonce with. And it's so easy to just be like, oh well, I won't go. But I went to the concert anyway. Went to the Houston show. Um Another time I went to, down to Florida on vacation with my family. And they were all going to like a Disney water park, but I have always been like a lifelong Harry Potter fan. And so I was like, I cannot come down here without going to Universal Studios. And so I end up going to Universal Studios by myself and spending that day by myself. And I'm talking about all these travel things, but I just really want you to understand that me putting myself in those positions and in those environments of me being on my own, while at the beginning it wasn't comfortable, but over time, I learned to enjoy my own company and I learned to realize that I don't have to wait for other people to live my life. Like, granted, I do feel like you can go. I feel like I went from being like all on solo vacation. I only want a solo vacation to like my last solo vacation. I realized like this is kind of lonely. I want, like I really want to experience traveling with someone. And so I'm just grateful because doing this research, it showed me that I did heal this part of myself. Before, I thought that I was taking way too long with being single. I've been single the last 5 years, but for a long time, I didn't think, oh yeah, I thought like this period of me not being with anybody or not being involved with anybody. Of course, I was having a woe is me. I was feeling lonely, all of those things. But over time, I came to realize that this period of me being alone really allowed me to fall back in love with myself and to center myself in my needs. And so now, when I go into my next relationship, I totally understand why Drake said a long time ago, like, it's going to take a really amazing person to help me change my schedule for them. Like, I'm learning to have my own groove and my own routine. And so I would just need a person that can come in and respect that. Last thing I want to say is that for me being single and me learning to be okay with myself, it happened in stages. At first, of course, I was on a dating website talking to anybody who would just talk to me. I then went to the point where I went off dating websites and I said, okay, I'm going to meet people in person. Again, I was just taking anybody number who asked for it. And then I would, when the relationship didn't work or they start cussing me out, so it's just like I learned that like moving forward now I'm on like the third stage where I'm not on the apps, but also I'm not just giving my number away to people because I'm very clear on what I want to experience next in a relationship. And so just being honest with myself and not settling anymore. And so that's where I'm at now. Like I'm not in a relationship, but I am open to one. And I'm actually like excited to do that process again, to talk to people. This year was actually the first time that I actually was talking to somebody for like a good 3 or 4 months. And it was just, I loved it. I love that process of like him planning dates and like getting dressed up and all those good things. And so now I can go back into the dating world from this place of play and excitement and not this place of desperation and please somebody just love me, okay? Right? All right, y'all. That was a lot. I knew this was going to be a pretty deep, in-depth episode with a lot of information, but I do hope that all that information that you got is helpful. I hope that you understand that the key here is to realizing that wholeness comes within. There is not going to be a person anywhere on this world that is going to come and feel that hole within your heart. And that's actually what my ex-boyfriend taught me. Being in love is not enough. There is so much more that comes to love. And we're going to get into some more letters to talk all about it. But until then, next week episode, I'm actually going to do an activation about codependency. I want to get some information from our guardian angels and our guides to figure out how to overcome codependency. We heard this from a clinical standpoint, from a psychology standpoint. Now we're going to go to a spiritual standpoint next week. So we're going to do that. I kind of feel like it's going to be a blockages reading, but we'll see how it goes. But until we get there, as always, please, please, please make sure you like this episode, share it to your favorite social media timeline. You never know who may come across it and who you may help out. The best ways to support this podcast is, of course, to subscribe and to leave us a review. 5 stars only. And then last but not least, please make sure that you join that mailing list and come join the Honest Society, where you would get heads up on when I go live, as well as more in-depth newsletters and other exclusive content. All right. Last thing I do want to say, remember, sis, you are the prize, and the journey to discovering that is the most important love story you'll ever live. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, want to just give feedback on how great this episode was, please contact me at honestlysis@gmail.com, or you can just respond to this email if you're getting this to your mailbox. And until we meet again, dream them dreams. Never let the internet rush you, and never ever let someone tell you what you cannot do. Thank you so much, friend, for helping my dreams come true. Now get your ass out there and work on your own, okay? All right. See you at the top, friend. Bye-bye.